So I don't know how many takes it's going to take me to make this video. Probably my seventh one right now, but we roll with it. So my name's Scott. I'm a fifth year medical student at the University of Cambridge, and the reason I'm making this video is because I'm tutoring a student who's going to sixth form right now, and I wanted to give her advice for university, and particularly I wanted to tell her that she should achieve the best that she can do, and she should apply to Cambridge or Oxford. I think every tutor wants to tell someone who is capable of getting a place there that they should do so, um, because these students should feel like they can achieve something that they're proud of. But I couldn't honestly tell my student that they should go to Cambridge, and the reason is because since coming here, my life has pretty much collapsed. My time here at Cambridge hasn't been good at all. It's actually been quite horrible, and I've spent more than 2 years of my life being pretty mentally unwell here, bordering on suicidal. Um, and things are hard, and they continue to be hard. Um, Life doesn't particularly get any easier. I think if Cambridge was a matter of dealing with the stress and dealing with the lifestyle, and then you get used to it, and then it's okay, then I would tell everyone to apply here. But it's not. It's it ruins your quality of life almost, or at least for me, since coming here, my life has got significantly worse. But I'm on an upwards trend now, and I now have, because of that, the clarity to speak about these things with honesty rather than just lament about everything and say how horrible everything is. So this is the reason why I'm making this video. And there's a problem for you, the viewer, which is how much do you trust me? So how much do you trust that I'm not just imposing my bad experience of life onto the university itself? Um, and it's very common with people who are like anti-establishment who have lots of shortcomings and lots of faults to impose their faults onto that university or that establishment. You know, they're not able to abide by the rules of the system, and so they blame the system rather than themselves. Now, the first thing I'd like to say about that is I genuinely believe that I have too much foresight to to do such a thing. I admit my faults and I can identify my faults when they're there. And I feel like I'm able to separate the instances where the fault has lied with me and the fault lies with the university or the environment which I'm put in. Now, I'm not a perfect person, but I shouldn't have to be perfect in order to fit in at this university. And even if I am a flawed person, and maybe it's because I'm lazy or uh, um, the fact that I've got some various problems with myself, and that's the reason why I don't particularly fit in here. Look, I know there's other flawed people out there too. Again, people shouldn't have to be perfect in order to survive in a pretty stressful, hostile environment. And I know that there's other flawed people out there who at least should be prepared before going to university. Now, the obvious thing to mention is that just because I've had a bad experience at Cambridge doesn't mean that you'll have the same bad experience. In fact, most people, actually, I'd say half of people who come here are pretty happy and they love it. But obviously, equally, there's a lot of people who come here and are unhappy and they suffer in ways that they don't really know why they're suffering, or they're so used to this environment that they forget how stressed they are. Take this video as a warning of things which may happen if you come to university at Cambridge and the things to watch out for. So, the first thing I want to talk about is the university experience, because the expectation to have a good university experience is quite damaging to a lot of people. So, when people refer to this idea, it's this idea that university is the peak of life. It's this period where every day is pleasure, everything's amazing. You get to go to new societies, go to different clubs, meet new people, adventure out. And once you leave university, um, you kind of enter working this boring, monotonous lifestyle, and you know, it's this idea that what follows is a slow senescence into death, and it's pretty damaging because number one, it's untrue that life after uni is so bad and that university itself is so great. It completely depends on what type of person you are. Look, university is probably great for you if you're extroverted, if you like adventure, um, if you've got no kind of hold-ups in life, like a relationship or family or things like that. And also, if you're ready to do all these things, there's plenty of people who later on in life want some type of adventure. They want to talk to new people and broaden their horizons, but they feel like because they've left university, they're unable to do so, and they feel a lot of regret for it. And this regret not only stops you from enjoying life, but it stops you from doing the things which would help you live life, which is partaking in that type of adventure. Um, and it's worth saying that the thing which most people get at university is a good set of friends, a good community, some good experience, and some good memories that you can look back on throughout your years. And people often overlook these good experiences because they're looking for some world-breaking, amazing, um, heaven-like experience. And so, yeah, I would personally, if there's anyone out there who feels this kind of regret about university or feels this expectation, I would recommend to let go of it completely. Now, if I had to explain what my university experience has been like, I would explain it as, I've had plenty of good experiences, but these have all turned quite bitter in my mouth sooner or later. I'm the type of person who likes to be close with other people, and I like to have meaningful connections with people. And, rather than doing things like going out clubbing and getting drunk, I'd much rather get drunk with friends or just socialize with friends. And, one of the most fond memories I've got in my life is quite recently I went out with friends. When we got drunk, we just basically danced around and messed about in a field. But because I was because I really love my friends from home, who I met before university, um, I just formed these really amazing memories. However, at Cambridge, I've written it here. It's an agonizing process of wanting to be close with people who don't want to be close with you, and of investing in people for it all to amount to nothing. There's a few people who I can rely on, who I have made decent friends with, and I know who genuinely care, but I barely get to talk to them, a couple times a week or a couple times a month, just simply because of the way that medical school works. So, you know, having bad relationships with people, well, this can happen at any university. This isn't something that, is unique to Cambridge, or at least you wouldn't expect it to be unique to Cambridge, right? But from my experience, I've been trying to be close to people, to have some good connections for the last 4 years, and I've come up empty-handed. And I don't think there's any other environment out there in the world in which it would be so incredibly hard. So I've tried to figure out why I've failed to be close with people at Cambridge. And just to clarify, it's very easy to be friends with people, but it's quite hard to be close with them. Um, and of course, it goes from your perspective that this could just be due to plenty of faults with me. Um, but I'm disregarding the instances which have been partly my fault. So let's go into it. I think one thing which contributes is the autism. And the way I would describe this is like, you've got plenty of people who are highly intelligent coming to Cambridge, and the chances are they're going to have some neurodiversity about them, right? And they're going to have some idiosyncrasies, which make it hard to deal with people, or it makes it hard to work around them, especially if they don't want to work around you. So I've met people at Cambridge who are, and I've got a list here, who are just emotionally immature, who don't have time for you as a person. This can either be because they're busy or because they just see you as, like a low status individual. They see you as like a beta or something. So they don't really talk to you. I've seen people who are very headstrong and opinionated. I've seen definitely a lot of people like this. And it's because people who are intelligent often place a lot of self-value around being correct, about um, knowing things, about having the right opinions. And so when there's a conflict, rather than, you know, being open-minded, a lot of people can be combative sometimes. I've certainly seen that. Some people are just completely fake. They'll be nice to you one minute and just chat shit about you behind your back in the next. Some people are completely self-centered. Some people are there's a lot of people who are socially inept, but for me, this isn't a. Um, I tend to get along with people who are socially inept quite well. The bit where it starts being a problem is you've kind of got to just be careful. Sometimes people will ask you to do things and they don't realize they're taking the piss a little bit. Or sometimes people will say something and, you know, it meant something in their head different to how they actually said, and a lot of things like that. So it's more challenging to work around as opposed to I can't be friends with someone because they're a bit socially strange, right? Um, people will purposely distance themselves from you for various reasons. Um, and I've met some people who are batshit crazy, literally crazy. So once you kind of filter and make sure these people don't have these traits that are very hard to be around, then you have a decent person who you can be friends with. But just because you can be friends with them doesn't mean that you kind of resonate with them as a person, right? Someone might be a very decent person, but you might not have the same interests. You might be from different backgrounds, so it's one of those. And the last thing I'd like to say is there's plenty of people here who are just unyielding, and the way I would explain this is this: if push comes to shove, um, these people have no problem like ditching you or getting rid of you or whatever it is. Um, and it can be for any reason whatsoever. If if it's in any way difficult, relationships work like this, right? When there's difficulty, you work together, you maybe fight a little bit, and there's a saying which is like when a rope is broken, and you tie it back together, the two ends are closer than they were before. That same principle doesn't work at Cambridge, at least from what I've seen. Once a rope is broken, it doesn't tie back together again, and people have no problem just being friends with or spending time with anyone else. So yeah, and yeah, it's certainly interesting to see all the different types of people at Cambridge and see the idiosyncrasies and see how different they are as people because people are very strong here, and you see lots of diverse people who are pretty amazing in their own right. But as I said before, it's too tiring to have to work around people when they don't work around you back. And um, for someone who likes to enjoy life through having a good set of friends, um, it's pretty crippling to not have one. Um, so yeah, so that's about the people at Cambridge. And to summarize, it's just harder to be close with people here. So let's talk about the stress of Cambridge. And everyone knows before coming here that the workload is pretty high. But I don't think it's impossible to manage. And the reason I say this is because for the last 4 years, I've been pretty blindly stumbling around. You know, I've I've not revised the things I should have done. I didn't know how to revise. I've messed around. Um, I've there's been long periods where I haven't done any work at all, and I've done okay. I mean, I've passed every exam so far. However, there's plenty of people who are quite intelligent and do work, but they end up failing. And it's not because they didn't work, but because they didn't work hard enough. And this is the exact problem. This is the toxic thing um, about competitive universities. Because with revision, there is no end point. There's sometimes in first and second year where I was revising 2 hours a day in exam season, and I felt pretty good about myself. But other people would be working 6 or 7 or 8 hours a day, and they felt that that wasn't enough, or they were stressing about it. Um, and to that extent, work becomes an addiction, and it becomes an addiction because um, people are working hard and they don't really know why they're doing it. They're just placed in an environment which expects them to do it. And I call this the seed of ambition. And it's a greater cultural phenomenon where um, people almost worship work. And I'm not going to go into much detail about it, except to say that people place a lot of value in getting a good job and earning a lot of money. And they place a lot of self value in their ability to put themselves in a situation where they have a good job or earn a lot of money. But as I said, the workload isn't that hard by itself, but when it's compounded with other people, it becomes quite difficult. So people at Cambridge don't go out as much as people at other universities. I know this for a fact. And they don't go out as much as they should, and here's why. If you've got an assignment, here's how it works. Somebody might do it at 2 p.m. to 4 p.m., or someone else might do it at 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Someone else might do it from 6 till 8, and another 8 till 10, or whatever it is, right? So if you've got one assignment, it's pretty hard to socialize for that entire day because someone's always doing something, right? And this isn't so bad when it's one essay 1 week or something like that. But when you've got a lot of work stacking up and everyone's got their own schedules, um, it becomes pretty hard to work around each other. Unless you all go to the library together and do it together and then go out together. But it's hard to organize your life in that way. And what happens is when you're surrounded by other people who are stressed and stressing a lot about work, you end up inheriting this stress. I didn't used to be a very stressy person when it came to work or revision, but it got worse and worse and worse over time. And only now am I trying to have to manually teach myself to relax and to give myself space and to just not worry so much. Um, you inherit this voice in the back of the head, in the back of your head, which tells you that you always have to be productive, you always have to be study. Um, and my reasons for studying are probably different to other people's reasons, but the thing that remains is this unhealthy working, stressing lifestyle. And to be honest, you stress even if you procrastinate. So yeah. Um, and so the question is why do other people here work so hard? And it's quite difficult because you ask people why they work hard, and they say because I want to do well. And then you ask them why do they want to do well, and they can't really give you a good response beyond that. So people want to do well, people want to get a good grades, people want to get a first over a 2-1 and so on. But how much really is that worth? How is a first versus a 2-1 the difference between a good and a bad job? How much money is it worth in terms of a career prospect to get a first over a 2-1? Well, it's impossible to ever be able to quantify that or know this. So you've got this impossible thing where people don't know how much they're going to improve their life by having a first, but they don't want to miss out. They want to do the best that they can. And people prior to this point have been instilled to do the best that they can. So they work and they work and they work and they don't really know why. And you run yourself into the ground so as to not regret anything. And I think this is a form of self-imposed slavery, to be honest. Um, you know, if you're organized, which I'm not, but if you are organized and you can work for a couple hours a day at the same time and you get this routine about, then then it's not so bad. But given that you've got a pretty volatile like schedule, especially as a med student, it is not that easy at all to be organized. And good luck trying to relax around exam time, especially if you've got people doing the same subject as you, because these people will just talk and talk and talk um, about what they know, what they don't know, what they need to do, certain conditions, certain management things, and you'll have 30 seconds of a conversation which is mildly interesting, followed by an hour of quizzing each other on exams, and it gets pretty exhausting quite quickly, especially when you're trying to relax. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is the culture imposed on the students by the university. And it depends on, to be honest, at Cambridge, it depends on your college, it depends on who your director of studies is, it depends on who your supervisor is, etc. I'm going to share a story of one of my experiences. So in first year, um, I just in exam season, my parents had a divorce, which was it was the worst part of my life up until that point. It was horrible, mainly because of the turmoil that was happening with my family members. Um, and it's not short to say that, um, in some respect, it was a matter of life and death, life and death of my family. So, um, so yeah, it's really stressful, and I'm not going to use the word traumatic to me, but there's still family members that I don't talk to now because of this event. Now, naturally, it's very difficult to work in an environment like that. Yeah, it's harder to focus on your personal life, never mind any sense of work. So I just didn't work. And I got a 2-2 that year. And realistically, I think a 2-2 was pretty good, considering that I did better than 30% of the year. But to your college, I guess that's not good enough because they get paid depending on how well their students do, or at least there's a lot of benefits to having, obviously, well-performing students. And that's to the status of the college, etc. So I had to have a meeting with with the senior tutor of the college. And what was described to be a supportive meeting, which is going to help you get the best that you can do to, make the most of your potential. It essentially just became a disciplinary meeting. The emails were worded like they were telling you off or having a go at you. And then when I actually got there, I said that this whole thing is framed to be something which is meant to punish me rather than encourage me to do better. And rather than saying, no, absolutely not, we're here to help you improve and make a good learning environment, I was essentially told to take responsibility for my mental health and for my learning. Now, when your family members are not, they're suicidal essentially, the last thing that you need to be told is to take accountability for your mental health and for your grades. If this was work in a workplace, you would be given time off. You would be able to arrange for time off and you'd be able to have it, right? Um, but you don't get that at university. And more to the point, even if you contact the correct support networks, they don't actually help you. So what you're meant to do, you have to do the exam and you have to do poorly. And then you have to have a meeting where someone's berating you for doing horribly, even though you entirely feel that you've done like quite well given the circumstances. Um, you're meant to feel shit about yourself, and I just ended up absolutely crying my eyes out. Not only because of the stuff that happened to me, but how shit I was meant to feel by myself for doing something that I thought wasn't that bad. Essentially, I was reprimanded because my parents had a divorce and I couldn't cope that year. And rather than being supported, I was made to feel accountable and I was reprimanded for it. Now, if that's the type of environment that you like, then you should definitely come to Cambridge. But I've got the impression that nobody wants to be made to feel shit about themselves when they try the best they can do. So, so yeah, the question that comes at the end of this is, why would anyone at all want to come to Cambridge? You essentially have to work hard. You have to. It's harder to be close with people, um, and it's a more unpleasant experience. People will have their reasons. Maybe you want to see a part of the world that you never would have had the opportunity to otherwise. Maybe for your particular degree, having the name of Cambridge really matters for your employability in the future. Um, and for those reasons, I can't really tell you that that's a wrong or a right reason. But if you're going to come to Cambridge, you ought to be prepared. And the other thing I want to say is, if you decide to go elsewhere, or if you don't get into Cambridge, you're not missing out at all, because someone who's hardworking and ambitious and wants to achieve their dream, um, will achieve it regardless of, I believe, regardless of barriers such as nepotism, regardless of, whether they got into one university or not through sheer chance. And also, it's important to consider that if you drop out of university because it's too stressful, because of the many problems that arise, then it would have all been for nothing. And plenty of people do drop out of university. I've had good friends who have found it stressful to go to uni, and they didn't even go to Cambridge. It's just how uni life clashed with them. So here's how I would view things if you're going to university. The first thing is trying not to hang onto these notions as status and opportunity. The second thing is to view everything as a tool, which is going to empower you, which is going to give you freedom, and which is going to help you accomplish your dream. So here's how things work. Everything in life should ultimately be to help you accomplish your dream and your dream lifestyle and your end goal. And to this extent, things should empower you, right? And realistically, you want more freedom in life, but the things which empower you often take away a little bit of that freedom. So you've got to weigh things up. If going to Cambridge is going to be the difference between £100,000 in income later in life, then maybe you're willing to stick it out for 3 years of stress. Maybe it's going to help you accomplish your dream overall. But if it's not going to empower you at all and it's only going to take away your freedom, then don't bother. And to me, Cambridge has only been an obstacle between me and my goals and my dream. It's only restricted me and it's not empowered me one bit. So that's basically it. If you've got any questions, I'll leave my contact details in the comments. And to summarize, people too often romanticize Cambridge, and they hold on to dreams of this dream of an experience which are privileged to only a few. You know, this idea of this amazing lifestyle that only a couple of highly hardworking, intelligent people have. Um, and in media, it's portrayed as this amazing, beautiful thing, but all is never what it seems. Um, in most things in life, to be honest, and often the true beauty and the true value in life are in the simple things which exist before you and have always existed right in front of your very eyes, as opposed to some vague thing out in the world which needs, you know, a million hours of work and 17 million hours of stress to accomplish. So yeah, I guess that's it.